Hello everyone and welcome. This is Dave Bredhauer, and today I'm going to show you a couple of quick cards using some easy distress background techniques. I'm using the single deer oval die today because I want to layer it with a couple of other dies that I designed that all go together. I'm going to start by cutting out the single deer oval out of a piece of white cardstock. And now I'm ready to create my background for the oval. I want to keep in mind that I want to fill in as much space on this piece of white cardstock so that the oval will get filled in with the background. I'll begin with sponging some Distress Oxide ink in broken china in different parts of the background. I'm going to end up putting lots of different colors on here, so I encourage you guys to play around, try to fill this in, overlap colors, and just make it really artistic. The next color that I'll use is Faded Jeans, a little bit darker blue, and I want to be sure and do lots of circles as I'm applying the sponged background and overlap those colors together. Sometimes one color will take over another color and you'll have to go back and add a little bit of the first color. That's okay. It's kind of fun to build up the color here. We're just trying to make a nice strong background. I'm going to use another color now, but just a little bit of it, fossilized amber, because I want to give the idea that there's a little bit of a light coming into this scene. So I'm just going to add it just a little bit in the upper right corner. I'm going to overlap a little bit of color onto that later, but for the most part, I want to keep that sort of isolated so it doesn't get too muddy. Especially now that I'm using Wilted Violet. This is a beautiful purple color. I really want to use a lot of this Wilted Violet all over the background, but I'm going to avoid the yellow just a little bit. Now I'm looking at my background and I'm realizing that that Distress Oxide Wilted Violet color really took over. So I'm going to put a little bit of that Faded Jeans color back in just to darken it. What this does is add a little bit more depth, and it makes the whole card a little more interesting because of all the colors that have blended and improved on each other. Now I'm going to spray it with a mixture of bleach and water. This is 1 tablespoon of bleach to 2 to 3 cups water. The more bleach you put in here, the brighter the spots are going to be. And I just want to double check that it's going to be big enough to fill in my snowy oval. Now I want to go ahead and send this through my die cut machine again because we're going to do some paper inlay. So I've sent it through and you can see that that background portion has been cut out in just the right size. And there's a couple more pieces that I need to chop out as well. You'll see those spaces down between his legs. Those have background on them also. We need to keep those so that when we inlay them into the white oval, it makes sense. It continues the background between his legs. Now I had this technique in mind, in fact this specific card in mind when I designed the die. I knew I wanted to create a background, and when I was going to inlay it, I didn't want to make too many pieces that I had to keep track of and put back into the design. So I just did this big background around the deer and then a couple spots between his legs, knowing that those would get filled in later. It'd be easy to keep track of. Now I'm going to glue this piece onto a powder note card. Powder is this very, very, very soft blue color. You have to put white next to it to even tell that it's blue, but it's so subtle that when you do put white next to it, it's a really neat background. So I'm going to glue that plain white oval frame on there, and then I'm going to add some glue into the open space because that's where I'm going to be sticking that background that we just popped out. I want to just put adhesive here and there. You can use glue or whatever your favorite adhesive is. You want to get a little bit close to where the details are around the reindeer antlers and the nose and the ears and stuff so that you can get that all glued into place nicely. So I'm taking a little bit of extra time, putting some glue right around his head, right around the sharp little corners there, so that when I adhere that to the card, it fits and it's nice and intact and stays down near all those little details. So you can see I want to just press that into place right around his ears and his antlers to make sure that those little bits get stuck down in all the little nooks and crannies there. And I'm going to continue on by putting the background pieces between his legs in place. I'll just put some glue down and get the last piece where it needs to be. Now I just love this background. The dark purple and the distress spots layered up against the white background is just really mesmerizing. I can't get enough of these kinds of backgrounds. I think that they look kind of magical. They can look like snowflakes. They can look like stars. And I could call the project finished here, but I'm going to put an extra layer on just to make it a little bit more interesting. This Batavia snowflake oval is just the exact same size as the single deer oval, so I'll use that as a layer to put a frame around that oval. I'm going to cut it out in just plain white cardstock and use a little bit of glue to get everything in place. And it's pretty easy to continue from here. The only thing you want to pay attention to is to make sure that the ovals match up. So take your time as you're layering these ovals to get the top and bottom lined up so that they're in the exact perfect position on top of each other. And next, I wanted to give it a little bit more dimension. So I have these Batavia snowflake dies. I designed these to work with all the Batavia products that I released this season, so it matches up to the snowflakes that are on this Batavia snowflake oval. I'm going to go ahead and cut those out. I've decided to cut them out in a shimmery, glittery cardstock. This is just a white cardstock with a bunch of glitter on it, and you can see it really catches the light. I thought it might be a good idea to provide some contrast. There's matte white cardstock that I've been using for the snowflake frame and the deer, and if I put a little bit of glitter on there, maybe that'll make things stand out a bit. So I'm just adding a little bit of glue on there, just in the spots where I'm going to be putting my matching snowflakes. So you just have to find what part of the frame matches your particular snowflake. I'm going to add just a little bit on there. It's such a small piece, it doesn't take a lot of adhesive, and I'm just going to hold my breath and get that in just the right position, just kind of fiddle with it a little bit. It doesn't take too much effort. And you can decide how many snowflakes you want to put on there. Maybe one or two, maybe the whole frame, but that's it. Your card is done. Now you might remember that there was a bonus piece left over in the die when you cut out that original background. You don't want to throw that away because it makes a cool card on its own too. It's nice and simple. You're just going to be adding adhesive to the back of it. And I've decided to put it onto a piece of dark cardstock. In this case, it's a dark navy note card to add a lot of contrast there. I'm going to be putting a piece of white on the inside. So again, just remember how we cut out a piece and then inlaid it into that inner portion. Same thing. I've run my die through the die cut machine with a piece of white cardstock, and I've saved those three pieces, the white background and then the other two that go between his legs. You can see that the pattern's showing up on the deer and on the frame, which is kind of a cool alternative look here. So it's really a great way to use up extra scraps. I like to make the most of my die cutting and crafting time, so it's a way to make another card that's just as interesting as the other. I'd recommend using one of these picker-upper tools. It's one of these little tools that have sort of an adhesive on the end tip, and it helps you pick up these small pieces and get them into the right spot. This saves you from fumbling with your fingers trying to get things in place. Now add a few sequins and you're all done. I'm calling this next one my Northern Lights card. I'm going to use this very special die that I designed called Sheer Treescape, where I played around with cut lines within the die. These lines just cut. They don't necessarily cut out a shape, but they add texture to the whole card, and I find that really interesting. I've done this on a few dies over the years, and I always love the result. It's subtle, and it's something you can only get done with a die. So you can see that some of the trees have those cut lines in it, some of them don't, and I'm just going to use that on a simple white cardstock as my base for the card. Now, if you love making distressed backgrounds as much as I do, this is the perfect project for you. I'm going to start with fossilized amber. I'm just going to add a few streaks of that coming up into the background, and I'm going to follow that up by surrounding it with broken china. I'm going to sort of overlap, but pretty much I'm going to keep that yellow, that fossilized amber color, unblended. I want to keep that a little bit isolated, just like I did on that first card, so that it doesn't get too muddy. And then I'm going to start filling in the rest of the background with faded jeans. That's going to be pretty much our primary color on there. I'm creating a sky, and I want to make it look like the Aurora Borealis or the Northern Lights. So I want to make it a night scene with little glows and pops of color here and there. Sort of a galaxy card, but just lots of little areas with lots of little different variations on the color. Now I'm not pressing too hard here. I'm just adding a little bit of color at a time because I'm planning on lots of blending and lots of layering. I'll follow up here with my wilted violet. This is the same color scheme that we used in the first card, but we're going to do it in a slightly different composition. I'm trying to make it look like the horizon is lighter, and then as we get further up into the sky, it gets darker. So I'm putting that purple up towards the top. I want to fill in a little bit more of that background with some faded jeans, so I'm adding another layer of that faded jeans over the purple here and there. I don't want to go over all the purple. I want some of that purple to stay there so that there's areas of dark and light, shades of violet and purple. And go ahead and spritz that with my bleach solution. Now to finish, I'm going to add some black soot Distress Oxide ink just around the edges, and I'm going to be careful. I want to swirl that on, but I don't want to make that take over the whole design, so I don't go too far in from the edge, maybe just 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch or so, and I'm swirling it on gently, lots of circles, so that as it goes on, it's slowly running out of color, and I'm blending along the lines all the way around the perimeter and just kind of getting that right towards the edge. I don't need to worry about the bottom portion. That's going to get covered up with the sheer treescape. So I'll follow that with a quick spritz from the bleach solution, and you can see what a dramatic background that's created. There's brighter spots and darker spots, creating lots of depth in this field. And I'm just going to be putting that sheer treescape right along the bottom. I want to position it so that the glow is coming out in just the right spot. I'll add a little bit of adhesive. And after I mounted this piece onto my background, I'll use my paper cutter to trim off any excess. So I'm just positioning it so that the color is coming out between the tree lines in just the right areas that I like. And then I'll use my paper cutter just to trim off that bottom so that there's no excess. This is going to be a way to customize the shape of the card. You can get it just the right size that you want and trim off any areas that didn't quite look right on the edges. Now once you got that, you're just going to be putting that onto a dark note card. Here I just chose a black note card because I think it was a nice contrast with the white. And you are all done. Thanks for joining me today. Now go make your own amazing Northern Lights card.